I walked through my front door after a 12-hour shift, expecting nothing more than a quiet evening with my wife. What I found instead was a handwritten manifesto taped to our bedroom door. 20 numbered rules under the bold title Anti-Patriarchy Bedroom Guidelines for Conscious Partnership. I stood there reading this madness, feeling my jaw clench with each ridiculous demand. Rule number 1. Permission must be explicitly requested before any physical contact. Rule 7. Acknowledge your male privilege before expressing any desires. Rule 15. Traditional masculine behaviors must be replaced with feminist-approved alternatives. 20 rules. 20 ways my own wife had decided to castrate our marriage in the name of her newfound political awakening. She emerged from the kitchen, arms crossed, wearing that smug expression I'd been seeing more often lately. I see you found the new guidelines. We need to evolve beyond outdated patriarchal patterns. I held up the paper, my voice cutting through her rehearsed speech. Evolution. This reads like a hostage negotiation written by someone who's lost their damn mind. Those rules create equality in our relationship. If you can't accept that, maybe you need to examine your toxic masculinity. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Toxic masculinity? The same masculinity that pays for this house, fixes everything that breaks, and works overtime so you can attend your little consciousness-raising meetings? Her face flushed red. That's exactly the kind of attitude these rules address. You think providing financially gives you ownership over my body. Ownership? I shook my head slowly. I think being married gives us both certain reasonable expectations. But apparently, you've decided to replace those with a feminist manifesto that reads like it was written by someone who hates men. She straightened her shoulders, trying to look authoritative. Those aren't negotiable. Either you agree to follow them, or you can sleep on the couch until you're ready to respect my boundaries. I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I married. Instead, I saw someone who'd been programmed by her weekly women's empowerment sessions to view her own husband as the enemy. You know what? You're absolutely right about one thing. These rules aren't negotiable. I pulled out my phone and took several clear photos of her precious guidelines. Because I won't be following a single one of them. Then you're not sleeping in our bed. Our bed. I met her eyes directly. Let me clarify something. After reading this psychological evaluation you've disguised as relationship rules, I realize you're not the woman I married anymore. You're someone who views intimacy as a power struggle and marriage as a political battleground. She blinked, clearly not expecting this response. I'm trying to make our relationship healthier. Healthier? I gestured at the list. Rule 12 says I need to deconstruct my masculine identity before physical intimacy. Rule 18 requires me to apologize for centuries of patriarchal oppression before we can be close. You've turned our bedroom into a feminist re-education camp. Those rules ensure mutual respect. No, they ensure you have complete control while I grovel for basic human affection from my own wife. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. But here's where your little experiment ends. I'm not negotiating with someone who's declared war on my gender. I'm filing for divorce. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. Over some bedroom guidelines. Over a wife who's been so brainwashed by radical feminism that she handed me a list of 20 ways to hate myself for being a man. I headed toward our bedroom to pack a bag. These guidelines are going straight to my lawyer as evidence of irreconcilable differences and psychological instability. You're overreacting. We can modify them. I turned back, my voice calm but final. You don't modify insanity. You divorce it. Congratulations on your anti-patriarchy revolution. You can wage it alone. As I packed my essentials, she followed me around trying to backtrack, but I'd seen enough. A woman who could write 20 rules to emasculate her husband wasn't having a bad day or going through a phase. She'd revealed who she'd become, and I wanted no part of it. I walked out that night knowing I'd never sleep in that house again. Some battles aren't worth fighting because the person you're fighting isn't worth winning back. She'd chosen her ideology over our marriage, and now she could live with that choice completely. The next morning, I sat in the office of Marcus Rivera, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. His reputation for demolishing opposing parties in court was exactly what I needed. 20 anti-patriarchy bedroom rules, he said, examining the photographs I'd taken. And she actually expected you to follow these? Every single one. She said they weren't negotiable and threatened to kick me out of my own bedroom if I didn't comply. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a predatory smile crossing his face. This is psychological abuse disguised as progressive politics. Any judge will see this as manipulation and control, but we need more evidence to paint a complete picture. I pulled out a small digital recorder I'd bought that morning. I'm going back to get more of my things. She'll try to argue with me, and I want everything documented. Smart. Also, I need you to think about patterns. Has she isolated you from friends? Controlled finances? Monitored your activities? The questions hit like punches. She convinced me to stop hanging out with my college buddies because they were reinforcing toxic masculine behavior. She took over managing our joint accounts 6 months ago to ensure ethical spending. And she started questioning every business trip, every after-work drink, saying I was avoiding emotional labor at home. Marcus typed rapidly. Classic controlling behavior wrapped in social justice language. She's been systematically dismantling your autonomy while positioning herself as the enlightened victim. This gets better every minute. When I returned to the house, she was waiting with red-rimmed eyes and a desperate expression. I've been thinking all night. Maybe we can compromise on some of the rules. I set my recorder on the kitchen counter, making sure she could see it. There's no compromise with crazy, but I am curious about something. When exactly did you decide to hate men in general, and me specifically? I don't hate men. I'm trying to create equality. Equality. I laughed harshly. Rule number 16 requires me to examine my internalized misogyny before expressing any opinion about women. Rule 20 demands I actively work to dismantle patriarchal systems in my daily life. This isn't equality, it's indoctrination. She started crying, which I knew was calculated manipulation. The women in my support group helped me realize how oppressive our dynamic had become. The support group. The same feminist cult that meets every Wednesday to teach married women how to destroy their relationships. They're not a cult. They're helping women recognize patterns of abuse. By teaching you to view normal marriage as oppression, by convincing you that your husband showing affection without written permission is assault. I shook my head. They've poisoned your mind against the very concept of being a wife. I'm still your wife. No, you're not. You're a political activist who happens to live in my house and share my last name. A wife doesn't hand her husband a manifesto explaining why his masculinity is toxic. A wife doesn't require him to apologize for his gender before they can be intimate. She grabbed my arm desperately. We can work through this. I'll throw away the list. I gently removed her hand. You can't throw away what's in your head. You wrote those rules because you believe them. You think I'm the enemy in our own home. I picked up my recorder. And this conversation is going directly to my lawyer as evidence that you're trying to manipulate me into staying in an abusive situation. Abusive? I'm the one being abused. By creating rules that treat me like a predator in my own bedroom, by demanding I deconstruct my identity to earn basic affection from my own wife. I headed for the door. Save the Victim Act for your support group. I'm sure they'll tell you this is all my fault for refusing to be emasculated. That evening, I met with Marcus again. The recording was even better than he'd hoped. Her admission about the support group, her manipulation tactics, and her complete inability to see how controlling her behavior had become painted a clear picture. She's going to try everything now, Marcus warned. Tears, threats, promises to change, maybe even accusations against you. Document everything. Don't meet with her alone, and whatever you do, don't let her guilt you into dropping this. I thought about the woman I'd married 5 years ago. Someone who actually respected masculinity instead of viewing it as a disease to be cured. That woman was gone, replaced by a feminist drone who saw our marriage as a power struggle she needed to win. The old me might have tried to save her from herself, but the man sitting in that lawyer's office understood something crucial. You can't negotiate with someone who's declared war on your existence. She'd chosen her ideology over our marriage, and now she'd learn what complete patriarchal absence actually looked like. Within a week of filing the papers, I discovered something remarkable. I'd forgotten what it felt like to live without walking on eggshells. The temporary apartment I'd rented was small but peaceful, free from feminist manifestos and political lectures disguised as conversations. My phone buzzed constantly with her desperate attempts to lure me back, but I was busy documenting everything Marcus had requested. I pulled bank statements showing her unauthorized spending on feminist workshops and consciousness-raising retreats. I screenshotted text messages where she berated me for masculine toxicity when I disagreed with her political views. I even found emails she'd sent to her sister describing me as another casualty of patriarchal conditioning who refuses to evolve. The most damaging evidence came from her own social media. She'd been posting for months about deprogramming her marriage, sharing articles about dismantling masculine entitlement, and celebrating small victories like making him ask permission before touching me. Every post was a public confession of her systematic campaign to destroy our relationship. But the real revelation came when I reconnected with old friends she'd convinced me to abandon. Tom, my college roommate, laughed bitterly when I explained what happened. "We tried to warn you, man. Remember when she made that scene at Jake's birthday party about us telling inappropriate jokes? She literally demanded we apologize for making you laugh at something she found offensive." I'd forgotten that incident, along with dozens of others where she'd gradually isolated me from anyone who might challenge her control. She'd convinced me it was growth to abandon friends who didn't align with her politics. Now I realized it was strategic isolation. My brother was even more direct. "She turned you into a stranger. The last time we had dinner, you apologized 3 times for expressing opinions she disagreed with. At your own kitchen table. It was painful to watch." The pattern became clear as I spoke with family and friends. She'd spent 2 years systematically dismantling my personality, replacing my natural confidence with constant self-doubt and apologies. Every masculine trait that made me who I was had been labeled toxic and scheduled for elimination. Meanwhile, she escalated her attempts at reconciliation. She showed up at my office building, crying publicly about how I was abandoning our marriage over a misunderstanding. When that failed, she tried anger, leaving voicemails screaming about how I was proving every stereotype about fragile male egos. The most pathetic attempt came when she recruited her mother to call me. "She just wants you to understand her perspective," her mother pleaded. "Maybe you could attend one of her group meetings to see what she's learned." "You mean the radical feminist cult that taught her to view her own husband as the enemy? The same group that convinced her to treat intimacy like a political negotiation?" I kept my voice respectful but firm. "With all due respect, those meetings are exactly why we're getting divorced." Marcus was documenting everything, building an airtight case that portrayed her as mentally unstable and systematically abusive. The bedroom rules were just the tip of the iceberg. We had evidence of financial manipulation, social isolation, emotional abuse, and clear documentation of her extremist political indoctrination. "She's going to come at you hard when she realizes you're serious," Marcus warned. "Women like this never accept responsibility. She'll claim you're the abuser, that you're punishing her for standing up for herself. Be ready for false accusations." Sure enough, she started telling people I was emotionally abusive for refusing to follow her bedroom rules. She painted herself as a victim of masculine oppression, claiming I'd threatened her for expressing her feminist beliefs. Her support group rallied around her narrative, posting on social media about supporting women who escape controlling husbands. But I had something they didn't expect: evidence. Every conversation was recorded. Every text message was saved. Every social media post was screenshotted. When her lies reached mutual friends, I simply shared the actual documentation. The bedroom rules spoke for themselves. No reasonable person could read 20 demands to deconstruct masculine identity and apologize for patriarchal privilege and conclude the husband was the controlling party. Her own words condemned her more effectively than anything I could say. By the end of the month, public opinion had shifted completely. People who initially sympathized with her struggle against an oppressive husband realized they'd been manipulated by someone who'd weaponized social justice language to justify psychological abuse. She was learning what complete patriarchal absence really meant. No financial support, no emotional labor, no protection from the consequences of her choices, and no man willing to sacrifice his dignity for her political theater. She declared war on masculinity and discovered what life looked like when masculinity simply walked away. When her individual manipulation tactics failed, she deployed her feminist army. The Sisters Supporting Sisters group launched a coordinated attack designed to pressure me back into submission through public humiliation. They started showing up at my workplace, holding signs about supporting women against abusive husbands. They posted my photo in their group chat with warnings about dangerous men who punish women for setting boundaries. They even contacted my boss, claiming I was creating a hostile work environment for women through my pattern of domestic abuse. What they didn't expect was my counterattack. I'd been patient long enough. Marcus had advised me to stay quiet and let them reveal their true nature, and they'd exceeded every expectation. Their social media campaign provided perfect evidence of harassment, defamation, and coordinated stalking. So I went nuclear. I created a detailed social media post with photographic evidence of everything. The 20 bedroom rules were displayed in full, alongside screenshots of her posts celebrating her campaign to deprogram our marriage. I included recordings of her threats, examples of her financial manipulation, and documentation of how she'd systematically isolated me from friends and family. The post went viral within hours. My wife handed me 20 rules to follow before we could be intimate, including requiring me to apologize for centuries of patriarchal oppression and deconstruct my masculine identity. When I refused to be psychologically castrated in my own bedroom, she called me abusive. Here's the actual evidence. You decide who the real abuser is. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of men shared their own stories of partners who'd used feminist ideology to justify controlling behavior. Women condemned the bedroom rules as manipulative and psychologically damaging. Even feminist commentators distanced themselves from such extreme tactics. But the best part was watching her support group panic. These women had built their entire identity around being victims of masculine oppression. Having one of their success stories exposed as an abusive manipulator threatened their entire narrative. They couldn't defend the bedroom rules without looking insane, but abandoning her would admit their movement created the monster. They chose self-preservation. Within 48 hours, the Sisters Supporting Sisters group issued a statement distancing themselves from extreme interpretations of feminist principles. They claimed her bedroom rules were personal choices that didn't represent their organization. Several members privately messaged me apologizing for the harassment campaign. My ex-wife found herself completely abandoned by the very people who'd encouraged her destructive behavior. The women who'd spent months telling her to make him respect your boundaries suddenly refused to answer her calls when those boundaries became public embarrassment. She tried desperately to control the narrative damage. She posted long explanations about how the rules were taken out of context and how I'd manipulated the evidence to make her look bad. She claimed the recordings were edited and the financial documents were fabricated. But she made a crucial mistake. She tried to debate the content instead of denying it existed. Those rules were meant to create healthier communication, she posted. Any man who truly loves his wife would understand the need for explicit consent and privilege awareness. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Thousands of comments mocked the idea that married couples needed written permission for affection. People shared the post with commentary like, "Imagine being married to someone who makes you apologize for your gender before you can touch them." Her reputation was in ruins, but she still hadn't learned the lesson. She doubled down, posting increasingly unhinged rants about how society wasn't ready for truly equal relationships and how men like me couldn't handle strong women who refused to submit. Each post made her look more unstable and vindicated my decision to leave. The woman ranting about patriarchal oppression on Facebook while her husband filed divorce papers over her psychological abuse wasn't exactly the feminist hero she'd imagined herself to be. Meanwhile, my life improved dramatically. Without her constant criticism and political lectures, my confidence returned. I rediscovered interests she'd convinced me to abandon because they were reinforcing toxic masculinity. I reconnected with my authentic self instead of the apologetic shadow she tried to create. The contrast was stark. While she spiraled into increasingly desperate attempts to salvage her reputation, I was thriving in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Her feminist awakening had awakened something in me too. The realization that I deserved a partner who actually liked men. By month's end, her support system had completely collapsed. The feminist group had expelled her to protect their image. Friends who'd initially supported her struggle against oppression quietly unfriended her as the evidence became undeniable. Even her own family started distancing themselves from her increasingly erratic behavior. She'd achieved her goal of dismantling patriarchy in our relationship. Unfortunately for her, she discovered that patriarchy included everything she'd actually valued about being married to a man. Now she could enjoy her victory in complete, permanent solitude. The courtroom was packed with spectators who'd followed the viral story of the anti-patriarchy bedroom rules. Marcus had warned me that high-profile divorces attract media attention, but I hadn't expected this level of public interest. Her lawyer, a feminist activist who specialized in defending women against patriarchal legal systems, looked increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus methodically presented our evidence. Every document, recording, and screenshot painted a clear picture of systematic psychological abuse disguised as social justice. "Your Honor," Marcus began, "the defendant didn't just create hostile living conditions. She documented her campaign to psychologically destroy her husband and celebrated it publicly as feminist progress. He displayed her social media posts on the courtroom screen, each one more damaging than the last. Posts about breaking down his masculine ego, celebrating moments when she made him question his male privilege, and sharing strategies for reprogramming toxic husbands." The judge, a middle-aged woman with no patience for theatrical nonsense, examined each piece of evidence with growing disgust. When Marcus played the recording of her demanding, "I deconstruct my masculine identity before we could be intimate," the judge actually shook her head. Her lawyer tried desperately to reframe the narrative. My client was simply attempting to create healthier relationship dynamics. These rules represented her legitimate boundaries as a woman seeking equality in marriage. Equality. The judge held up the list of bedroom rules. Rule number 11 requires her husband to acknowledge his role in perpetuating rape culture before any physical intimacy. Rule 17 demands he actively work to dismantle his internalized misogyny through daily self-reflection. This isn't equality, counselor. This is psychological torture. I watched my ex-wife squirm as her own words condemned her. She'd been so confident in her feminist righteousness that she documented everything, never imagining those celebrations of male deprogramming would be used as evidence of abuse. The financial evidence was equally devastating. Bank statements showed she'd spent thousands on feminist workshops, radical therapy sessions, and consciousness-raising retreats without my knowledge or consent. She'd used our joint credit card to fund the very ideology that destroyed our marriage. The defendant systematically isolated her husband from friends and family who might question her control. Marcus continued. She monitored his activities, controlled household finances, and used emotional manipulation to enforce compliance with increasingly extreme demands. Her lawyer's final argument was predictably desperate. "Judge, we cannot allow this court to criminalize feminism. My client's efforts to address inequality in her marriage represent legitimate self-advocacy, not abuse." The judge's response was swift and cutting. "Counselor, feminism doesn't give anyone the right to psychologically abuse their spouse. Creating 20 rules to emasculate your husband isn't equality. It's systematic cruelty." The evidence clearly shows the defendant engaged in controlling, manipulative behavior that no person should endure in marriage. When it came time for the settlement, Marcus had prepared for total victory. Her public statements about my internalized misogyny and patriarchal conditioning had eliminated any possibility of claiming spousal support. Her documented abuse made asset division straightforward. "The defendant will receive no alimony," the judge declared. Her public statements demonstrate she views marriage as a political battleground rather than a partnership. She cannot claim financial need while simultaneously celebrating the destruction of that partnership. I watched her face crumble as the judge awarded me the house, the majority of our savings, and sole possession of the business assets she'd tried to control. Her feminist awakening had cost her everything she'd actually valued about being married. The final blow came when the judge addressed her directly. "Mrs. Henderson, your behavior represents a cautionary tale about allowing political ideology to poison personal relationships. You transformed your marriage into a psychological experiment and documented the process with disturbing pride. The court hopes this experience teaches you the difference between equality and domination." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions about the viral divorce case. I kept my statement simple and devastating. My ex-wife spent 2 years trying to deconstruct my masculinity. Today she learned what happens when masculinity simply chooses not to participate in that destruction. Her lawyer rushed her past the cameras, but not before someone shouted a question about the bedroom rules. Her breakdown was immediate and public, screaming about how the patriarchal legal system had failed to protect her from my abuse. The footage went viral within hours, cementing her reputation as an unstable extremist who'd used feminist ideology to justify psychological torture. The contrast between her courtroom meltdown and my calm dignity spoke volumes about who'd actually been the victim in our marriage. That evening, I sat in my house, legally mine now, reading messages from men around the world thanking me for fighting back against weaponized feminism. But the real victory wasn't public vindication. It was the knowledge that I'd refused to be broken by someone who viewed my gender as a disease requiring treatment. She declared war on masculinity in our marriage. The court had just declared masculinity the winner. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was living a life I'd forgotten was possible. The house felt like home again, without feminist manifestos taped to every surface. I'd reconnected with friends she'd driven away, returned to hobbies she'd labeled toxic masculine behavior, and rediscovered what it meant to exist without constantly apologizing for my gender. Her situation had deteriorated spectacularly. The feminist group that created her monster had permanently expelled her after the viral courthouse meltdown. Apparently, having one of their success stories publicly exposed as an abuser was damaging their recruitment efforts. Her former sisters-in-arms wanted nothing to do with the woman who'd become a cautionary tale about feminist extremism. The same women who'd encouraged her to deprogram. Her husband now claimed they'd never supported such radical tactics. They'd found a new scapegoat for their movement's failures. She tried desperately to rebuild her reputation, posting long explanations about how she'd been manipulated by extremist influences and was now seeking therapy to address her past mistakes. But the damage was permanent. The bedroom rules, her public celebrations of psychological abuse, and her courtroom breakdown had created a digital footprint that would follow her forever. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved back with her parents after being unable to afford rent on her reduced income. The woman who'd spent years lecturing me about financial independence was now dependent on the very patriarchal family structure she'd claimed to despise. Her dating life was non-existent. What man would risk involvement with someone famous for psychologically torturing her previous husband? Her social media posts about looking for a truly enlightened partner attracted only mockery from people who remembered her 20 anti-masculinity rules. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My business had grown substantially without her constant interference about ethical practices and complaints about my capitalist exploitation. My social life had exploded as word spread that I was single again. Apparently, being the man who'd successfully fought back against weaponized feminism made me quite popular. Women approached me constantly, many sharing their own horror stories about partners who'd used social justice language to justify controlling behavior. They appreciated finding a man who wouldn't tolerate manipulation disguised as progressivism. The most satisfying moment came when I ran into her at the grocery store. She looked exhausted, defeated, older than her years. When she saw me, she actually tried to approach with some pathetic attempt at reconciliation. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," she began weakly. "Maybe we both made mistakes." I looked at her with complete indifference. "We didn't both make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to view our marriage as a political experiment. You chose to treat intimacy like a negotiation with a war criminal. You chose to celebrate psychologically abusing your husband as feminist progress." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. I was influenced by some bad advice. You were influenced by ideology that taught you to hate your own husband. Now you get to live with those consequences permanently. I started to walk away, then turned back. By the way, thanks for the bedroom rules. They made excellent evidence in court. As I drove home, I reflected on the bizarre journey that had brought me to this point. A simple list of anti-patriarchy rules had revealed the depths of her psychological manipulation and led to my complete liberation from someone who'd been systematically destroying my identity for years. She'd succeeded in her goal of achieving complete equality in our relationship. Now we were equally divorced, equally free, and equally responsible for our own happiness. The difference was that I'd learned to thrive without her, while she discovered she couldn't function without the very masculinity she'd tried to destroy. Her feminist revolution had ended with total patriarchal victory, not through domination, but through complete absence. She'd pushed masculinity out of her life so thoroughly that she'd forgotten it was the foundation everything else was built on. Now she could enjoy her truly equal relationship with solitude.